It. Okay, we are recording. Yay, welcome.
Okay.
Well, I always hate hitting that record button because I immediately really feel like, oh, I'm on.
Giselle, sit down. My dog is right.
Oh, is your dog there with you?
Yeah, she's out of picture range. She's behind me. We adopted a poodle, a 3-year-old standard poodle, up 6 months ago, and been working with her. She's what's the word? She doesn't like to be alone. She has separation anxiety, so she always has to be with somebody. So.
Oh gosh.
And then Casper, my white cat, is behind the screen. He can't see him, but he's observing.
Got it. Well, we may have visitors from my kitty Sebastian, who's gigantic and gray and likes to empty his contents on the couch. And Sandwich, our Chihuahua, who adopted us. Uh-oh, you're frozen. Am I frozen too? We'll see. I think what I might do is log out and log back in. So yeah, I'm going to do that. Oh, okay. I wonder if there's a way to pause.
From cable here in Austin, Texas. You think? Okay. As I think I told you, I did not look at the questions, so we'll be spontaneous. How about that?
That's fine. It seems to me, I mean, I'm very nerdy, so I've listened to your interview a few times and everybody else's because I really loved it. So I don't think there's a whole lot of surprises here. And we have this little group with the students where the students come up with questions. So I got 2 questions sent to me via this app called Slack this morning. So those are not on there. So maybe I'll just ask those first. Oh, but this is my first one for this. I need to ask your permission to be part of this project again.
Yes, you have my permission as part of your project.
Woohoo! Emergence. Okay, so I'll tell you the two questions. And I really love your cap. I'm feeling a little jealous right now.
Oh, this is a precious cap. Yeah.
Wonderful.
I have a few mementos from Gordon still in the house.
Oh, I love it. So one of the questions, Talisa's question was, can you share any ways that your time at Gordon has been, I guess I'm paraphrasing her question a little bit, but has it been formative? How has it affected you as you have traversed through life?
I don't know how many of those lessons I would have learned anyway. But I guess I learned you have to be on your own. You're responsible for your own behavior, and actions have consequences. And there are 2 paths that you can take, and in the case of a military school, one is to follow the orders and the military discipline, and the other is to rebel. And if you rebel, your life is harder. So it was easier to go along. After I was rebellious in the first few months of my first year when I was 12 and just turning 13, after I learned that life would be easier if I went along to get along, as the politicians used to say, I learned to live into it. Then later in life, because when my dad was already dead and my mother died when I was 20. So I was married at 19, so I was already on my own. And the lessons at Gordon were that you had to take care of your own business. You had to be responsible for yourself. I think that addresses her question. So those lessons have been part of my upbringing or my growth throughout life.
Yeah. I love that it sounds like that things that you learned while you were being educated were some pretty crucial life skills.
Well, I will also say I think I learned leadership. We were inspired to lead. I say we were. That was a goal. Some of the guys didn't get it, didn't want it. They just wanted to not be bothered. They wanted to do their own thing and never aspire in a higher office. But I had this ambitious streak, and the environment of Gordon fed into that, watered it like a plant. So I was extremely ambitious. I was class president for 2 years, and then class vice president for 2 years, or treasurer. And I was the first in my class to be elevated to cadet officer. At the time I began, high school students could only rise to sergeant major, which is the highest cadet NCO rank. We weren't allowed to be officers. Only college students could be officers. But they changed that a year before, 2 years before, and only a couple of the boys in each class were allowed to become officers. And for me, because I was ambitious, I was the first one. And then my very good friend and roommate was the second officer in the class. And that means we had different types of uniforms and different privileges and things like that. So I guess leadership was a skill that I learned about how to inspire people to do their best, and I was complimented on it. So I have tried to be a leader throughout the rest of my life.
That's wonderful. I have so many questions running through my head right now. So one of the things that you said was that you lost your dad before you were 12, right?
No.
Uh-oh. Oh no, we're freezing again.
Either way, I apologize. My end, sometimes Spectrum cable is not very good.
Yeah, so I used to have that problem here too.
I don't know where we dropped off.
Well, I was just asking you about your age when your father had passed and you'd moved on to Gordon Military School. Full disclosure, I have a new, my daughter just turned 12. So we're just hitting that phase where this just seems to be so incredibly crucial. And I'm fascinated that there were kids that young on campus. I'm not sure, because we got cut off, I'm not sure where I was going with that thought.
Well, I'll just share with you. My father died when I was 6, nearly 7. And I was already pretty precocious. I was a spoiled little redheaded kid. And so I began to act out. And my mother was trying to raise, there were 3 of us, my older sister, my older brother, and I. And I was causing quite a bit of trouble. I was on my way to being a juvenile delinquent. And at a family reunion, a year or 2 or so, no, longer than that, after my father died, my mother was talking with cousins about my misbehavior, and their answer was, her name was Iris. The answer was, well, hell, Iris, send him to Gordon. They'll straighten him out. And because I had older cousins that had attended Gordon, a local family, the Moy family, M-O-Y-E, my cousin, first cousin, all 4 members of that family attended Gordon. And I have an older cousin who lives in California. She graduated in 1950, I think, from the high school, 49 or 50. Anyway, and long story short, uh, my sister graduated from high school in 1960, spring of 63. She obtained a scholarship to Brenau University. It was then Brenau College up in Gainesville. And so my mother chose that time to move back to Georgia. We were living in Washington, D.C. And it was the right thing to do to enroll my brother and I at Gordon. And I was 12, entering the 8th grade. So, and I was absolutely bewildered and terrified and intimidated, and felt completely lost. And my first couple of weeks there at Gordon, I wrote these tear-stained letters to my mother. Please, Mom, please let me come back home. I'll be a good boy. I'll never misbehave again. And this story is in the first interview. And my mother came down, talked to the commandant, and we had a conference, the commandant, my mother, and I. And after a few minutes, the commandant turned to my mother and said, Mrs. Robertson, this boy's going to be just fine. So I stayed. But yeah, I was 12 years old. I was
your baby.
Yeah, I had no conception of what this was all about.
Oh,
but and it was a big reality check when we had the first morning, and you were awakened at 5:30 or 6 in the morning. You had to hop out of your bunk, stand in a hallway to be counted, and you stand there in your skivvies or your pajamas or whatever you wore to bed. You were counted, then you're sent back into your room. You better dress and get ready to go eat breakfast. So that was all new to me.
Wow.
That's too long an answer, I think, but
No.
about being 12.
Oh, golly. I think it paints a wonderful picture, though. I think it's awesome. So there's so many questions on this sheet that I'm glad you didn't read it, because I'm overwhelmed looking at them. But one that kind of jumps out to me is right now is we've learned a lot through interviewing a lot of people. So we've learned this is our students are very enthusiastic and very thorough. That talks about Gordon Military College, the historical overview, like all the crazy things that happened that before you were born, even Brown versus the Board of Education, and the Alumni Hall was dedicated to Senator Richard Russell, who gave an address.
That's who I was named after.
Whoa.
My mother and father admired Senator Russell at the time. And I always asked my mother, why did you name me Russell? Because Russell's kind of one of those nerdy names. You know, it's not.
Not cool like you were.
No, it wasn't. Anyway, and she said, well, when you were born, you were red-haired. Russell is the anglicized version of the French word for red fox, but we were admirers of Senator Richard Russell, and that's why that was one of the reasons. And I was always aware. I remember walking out in front of the campus before the buildings were changed. There was a historical marker that talked about Richard Russell is among the noted alumni of Gordon. And I thought, yeah, okay, that's my connection.
Yeah, I'll bet that made you feel like you really belonged.
Well, until I found out a little bit more about Richard Russell's politics. Not so much. That's okay. I'll just choose. They named me Russell because I was red-haired.
It takes
I'll just leave it right there.
That's right. It takes all perspectives.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that is at the end of this final question, we'll just do the final question right at the beginning, because I'm a theater professor, so I just have to follow my impulses. But how do you think that we should use the information on campus to build the campus and the community that we have now to address 21st century challenges? That's a very complex question.
Wow.
I know. You want me to say it again?
Yeah, it sounds like what wisdom from the old alumni can be applied to the school as it is now. Gee, that's a tough question, except maybe just to listen. There's nothing new under the sun. all of the things that we're experiencing, even the troubles that the kids who are at school today are experiencing, whatever their life story may be, it's new to them, but it isn't new. Others have experienced that. So I guess if there's any comfort that a young person can get from listening to the stories of an older person, it would be like, other people have been there before. Other people understand what you're going through. Life is hard. Life is a challenge. Uh, but, and you're facing it alone for the first time, but other people have been there too. And they can help you if you listen, because their experience may be of value to you. That's about the only way I would know how to answer that question.
I like that. Okay, so this sort of tags off of that. I'm 54, and
Mhm.
so one of the things that I've noticed is, and I've been teaching college sort of, I wouldn't say accidentally. I would say I've always had a teacher's heart, but as you know, this job was not one that I sought out. It's just one that I kept after I got it because I love Gordon. Um, but I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about the relevance of higher education. It's become, I've noticed even in the 7 years that I've been at Gordon, it becomes increasingly difficult for students to get a degree. It's just the data is amazing how the kinds of, unless you have come from a little pillow of privilege to manage to do it. And I was a very poor kid. Like, I was not a person from privilege at all. So me saying that I think for me it was easy, when I know that I struggled to find food to eat when I was in college, is saying a lot, is I guess why I bring that up. So do you have any thoughts about the relevance of getting an education beyond high school right now?
Not everyone needs to have a college degree to be successful in life. Too many young people feel forced to attend a college to get some sort of 4-year degree, um, because that's where all the job opportunities require it. So it seems. But I think that's a bad expectation, because not everyone who wants to go to college should be able to go. But not everybody needs to go to be successful in life. So everybody has different gifts. And uh, I have my oldest son is a mechanically minded, technical. He can fix anything, and he loves being in that environment. He doesn't need a college degree. He doesn't have one, and he's perfectly happy in that respect. And I'm speaking of valued, skilled tradesmen, carpenters, electricians, computer technologists, plumbers, um, trim carpenters, cabinet makers. How close is a cabinet maker is to being an artist? You know, they're very close in their abilities. Uh, so what would college do for that? Also, I think nowadays college is way too expensive. It's far too expensive, and I frankly don't understand how it can be sustained this way. We're sort of in this circle where kids borrow a huge amount of money to get a degree, and at the end they say, no, wait a minute, what was I trained for? What am I going to do? I mean, I'm 72. I still don't know what I want to do in life with my degree. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm just surviving. So, I mean, I happened to go into real estate, and I did some other things, but anyway, when I graduated from Georgia State in 1972, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I was overwhelmed. College is way too intricate and too difficult, and we have this industry that's been built up, and it's far too expensive. My father started going to SMU in 1930. He lived in Dallas. and he was supporting his mom because his dad had died when he was young. And he went to SMU for 2 years. All he did was take a streetcar across town, but he couldn't afford it. So it was cheaper for him to come all the way down to the Austin, 250 miles away, and live on campus and get his degree, because the state universities were so much less expensive than SMU. And he graduated in 1934, but he had to struggle. And I certainly feel like I had to struggle. I was married and had 2 kids and working full time during the day and going to school at night. And I had to do it in 4 years. Otherwise, I was going to be drafted into the Vietnam War. College is I feel for kids who trying to go to school nowadays. It's really hard. I'm sorry, that was pretty lengthy. I didn't mean for that to go on like that.
I appreciate those thoughts. It's something, and honestly, it's not one of the questions, but it's on topic. I think about it all the time. So that wasn't lengthy. That was helpful, I think.
My college loans cost $5,000 to go for 4 years at Georgia State. In 1972 dollars. I don't know what that would be. 50,000 now? I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But it was a heck of a lot of money. And I used a National Defense student loan. I had to pay it back. And when I didn't make my payments, I would hear from those people. So
yeah, it's a lot of pressure on parents too right now.
Indeed, yeah.
It does need to be. I agree. I don't think it's sustainable. And I also agree with you that if you want to go to college, if you're like, I've always thought I had a teacher's heart because I like school. Not everybody does. Yeah, if you want to go to school, you should be able to go to school. It shouldn't cost so much. It's ridiculous. Right. Okay, so let's see here. Some questions. This research project that we're working on, Emergence, it is focused on transitional times. And were there any moments in your first interview maybe that we didn't go into enough depth about? So the things that you talked about in the first interview, I was born in 1967. So I wasn't aware of those until I started studying about the time when I was born. That was crazy times. And it made me understand, some of the emotional stuff that my parents went through. And so I'm just wondering, like the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, integration, at Gordon, the fact that UGA, or not UGA, sorry, the USG ended up basically, I guess, purchasing Gordon.
It came full circle. Remember, in 1934, the campus was Agricultural and Mechanical College number 5 or whatever it was. And the state of Georgia couldn't afford it to maintain it. So they reached out to Gordon Institute, which was located in the area of Thomaston Street, where the county commission building is now, and the elementary school across the street, or the high school, which was in the elementary school. Reached out to Gordon and said, we've got this campus. And Gordon Institute people said, okay, we'll take it. So they moved across town and took over the campus. And then for that was 1930 something, 34. Then here comes the late 60s and the early 70s, and the economic model that Barnesville had with Gordon for its high school, educating its high school students, was illegal and couldn't work anymore. One's not sustainable. And the school was running out of money. They couldn't afford to keep running the school. So they reached back to the state and said, hey, University of Georgia system, we've got this school. Would you like to take it over or make it just a 2-year college and only? And so that's what happened. And then a 4-year college. And now, so it's a full circle that the state couldn't afford it. And then Gordon could to run the school, and then Gordon couldn't afford it. I think that's an interesting perspective on the school.
That's good.
And yeah, that was the late 60s were a time of incredible upheaval. Everything was changing. Of course, it's all in perspective. Young people now, viewing the world, may say the same thing. I mean, to them, it's a time of incredible upheaval. Unfortunately, there's too many common elements from the time of the coming of age and now. History repeats itself. There's nothing new.
It does feel like it's repeating itself, doesn't it?
Yes.
I mean, again, I can only say that from a research perspective. You know, when you're a toddler, you don't know things on an intellectual level, but I certainly experienced it and I've talked to my parents about it since. But I think about all the changes that we're going through now. And even though one can hope that we'll have the same positive outcomes from all the upheaval, it's still upheaval.
Yeah. And it creates stress. And then with social media being what it is and our political climate being what it is, people don't even want to go out their front door. Everybody just feels more comfortable staying inside and don't get on the computer.
No, it's true. And, you know, as an artist, communication and telling stories is what it's all about. And so it's become really tricky on every level, I think. My another question that is on here is, when you were at Gordon, did you have any cross-racial friendships that endured, and if so, how did that affect you coming up?
A couple, because there were only a couple of minorities in our class and they came in late. That is, I don't remember minorities being at Gordon until I was maybe in the 10th or 11th grade. I'm not quite sure. I just don't remember. It wasn't a thing. I mean, it was like, oh, okay. You know, because Gordon was its own little world. We were kind of protected, insulated from the news of the day. It wasn't until later that we were allowed to have televisions. So we were kind of unaware of a lot that was going on, but it wasn't a big deal. That it was kind of weird that, hey, there's no minorities in my class. Oh, there's a couple. Oh, okay, everything is fine. But it wasn't fine. I can't imagine how much courage it took for the Black kids that first started to attend Gordon to go, because I know they must have felt out of place, uncomfortable, and that had to be just awful. A couple of my classmates, we reacquainted ourselves at our 50th reunion. I had a chance to chat with them, and they had wonderful, successful lives. I'm very happy about that. But because there were only 2 or 3 racial minorities in our class, and I did not develop any really close friendships with them. I know that they excelled in the areas that they chose to get involved in, whether it's academics or athletics. They're good people.
Yeah, that's interesting. We have a similar upbringing in that respect. I grew up in Indianapolis, and I think maybe 4 or 5 Black kids in all of my K through 12, because I went to parochial schools. And I was so sheltered, just as you were saying, that number one, I thought the whole world was Catholic. I was very confused when I got to college, when I found out that there were other faiths. I knew they existed, but I was like, oh, but like there's lots of people who aren't Catholic. Okay. And then the other thing, of course, was that maybe 4 or 5 Black kids in my life until then. And so when I moved to Georgia, I was pleasantly surprised to be encountering people who didn't look like me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nice.
Either living in a diverse community or travel will give you a different perspective about life. Certainly it was true. Interestingly, we had boarding cadets always had to go to church. You couldn't, if you ditched going to church on Sunday, you got in trouble. And so they knew which church you were supposed to go to. So all the boys going to the Baptist church would line up in the formation and march to church. And the boys that were Methodist would do the same, or Presbyterian or whatever it might be. But I know we did have some Jewish kids, but I don't know there was no temple in Barnesville. So the Jewish kids did not have to go to their religious services especially it was on Saturday anyway. But we Episcopalians and the Catholic boys had to hop on a bus and go over to Griffin to go to church. And we would all get off the same spot, and the Catholic boys would go to the Catholic church, and the Episcopalian boys would go to the Episcopal church. But because there were no faculty people in Griffin, we'd go to the Blue Goose Cafe and sit around and have bacon and eggs, and then come back and catch the bus back. Nobody was the wiser. Nobody told. So I missed, except my godmother happened to attend the Episcopal church there in Griffin. She knew why I wasn't there, and I got in trouble that way. And but that was, so I learned when I went to Gordon that there are people of other faiths. So you live a very insulated life. We all live in our little cocoons. So we're sheltered, and we're just not aware of what's going on in the world, the outside world.
When you made that journey from Maryland to Georgia, what was that like? Do you have any recollections?
Frightening. That was frightening. I didn't know what was going on. I knew that I was creating so much trouble for my mother, just being a bad kid, delinquent kid, and getting in fights and things like that, just being a bad boy. I knew that I had a fear that my day of reckoning was coming. But it began to dawn on me when we pulled up in Barnesville and we went inside Weisbrom's department store, and my mother started speaking with Mr. Weisbrom about the things that she would need to buy for me to equip me to go to Gordon. And I began kind of look sideways like, wait a minute, now what is this all about? Then I was taken with my new gear that I bought at Weisbrom's department store up to the campus and deposited there, and received my uniforms from the uniform store there on campus. I knew my life had changed, and I was afraid. I was so afraid. I was bewildered and unhappy, and I felt abandoned. So I struck out. I got in fights in the first few days there, and older cadet took me around behind the pound hall, behind the barracks, and we had a pugilistic conversation, and I lost. He won. And I thought, this isn't working. My way of reacting isn't working. I'm going to have to change the way that I react, because I didn't want to get beat up anymore. But one of the things about military barracks life at Gordon, we had a true bully system. Everybody got bullied a lot, hazed. It was tough. Screaming at people, this close, somebody's face this close, yelling at the top of their voice about what a low life you were, that your underwear wasn't folded correctly, your closet wasn't hung correctly. And they would go in and take their stuff out of your room and throw it out the window, including your bunk, your mattress, blankets, pillow, everything, because you had not done it right. I mean, it was, you either will conform or we're going to make your life miserable. And as I rose up through the cadet ranks, I did the same thing. You learn, that was what I was taught. That's how you behave. So I was a terrible bully. I was a mean guy, but I was also a pretty fair cadet officer. I mean, I received leadership accolades, but it was also tough. but I was intimidated when I first came to Gordon. Scared. I'm just so afraid, so unhappy.
Mm. I know that when I moved to Georgia in 1998, that my mother was scared. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's just so silly. That was so long ago that bad things happened in Georgia. And I had driven down to Georgia and checked it out and thought, oh, this is like the United States' best kept secret. This place is gorgeous.
Georgia is a beautiful state, and I've been living in Texas here for, gosh, 20, 30, 40, 30 years. I do miss Georgia. I love to go back. When there's Atlanta, it's beautiful. The whole state is just gorgeous, and I love it. I miss it deeply. But I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., and we would travel from Washington down to Georgia because family down there. We'd come every summer. So I got a good taste of Georgia. I mean, I knew at least, well, I'm going to Georgia. Where are we going? Well, we're moving. And you're going to Gordon.
Golly. Let's see here. Are there any teachers that jump out at you, and did they have any particular resonance with you?
Mrs. Witcher was my English and French teacher. Her husband was a teacher at Gordon too. And I seem to connect with Mrs. Witcher. She, as I say, she taught English and French, and her husband taught Spanish in the college. And that Mrs. I always had an affinity for Mrs. Witcher. And my schoolmates, not everybody did, but I liked her, and she seemed to like me. Mrs. Rainey was a wonderful math teacher, and Mrs. Rainey's son spoke at our 50th class reunion. She was a wonderful teacher. Captain Andrews was my 8th grade civics teacher, and he was the one that really introduced me to what was expected as a cadet. He was very strict, and if you tried to get away with anything in Captain Andrews' class, he would punish you. But you needed it. It was the right thing to do. Coach Judy was a wonderful athletic coach, and he loved all the guys, and so did Coach Wyndham, Joe Wyndham, who's I'm sure he's passed away now. Golly, so many teachers.
I can't believe you remember all the names.
Cecil Davis was my 8th grade Georgia history teacher. He was a hoot, just hilarious, just funny as hell. I mean, just he made it everything funny. Captain McFadden, Paul McFadden, was my world history teacher, and because I had world history right after lunch, I was always so sleepy that I would sleep in class. But as a cadet, you would learn how to sort of sit upright and put your chin in your hand and look like you were taking notes, but you were really asleep. Sorry, Captain McFadden, that I slept through your class, because now I'm a history nut. Gee, I know there are more, but those are the ones that come to mind.
You brought up the drama teacher. She had an interesting name.
Zedene, Zedene. Isn't that a beautiful name? That's just lovely. Mrs. Long, my brother was 2 years older than I was. He got involved in drama and speech. He was in her speech class, and became involved in drama. And he said, "Come on, we should do this." So she was our drama teacher, and we put on plays, and it was just great fun, just so much fun. And for a kid who was, who always tried to get moved to the front of the line, that was me. I loved being in the spotlight of being involved in drama. It was a lot of fun. And we didn't have great facilities. The first plays, as I said, were done on the gymnasium floor at what is now Gilboa Hall, because it used to be a gymnasium locker room. And there was no curtains, so they would just darken the lights, and everybody would move around in black and change the scenery, and then turn the lights back up again, and that would be our new scene. And then we did, after Alumni Memorial Hall was completed, we did move over there to do the other plays that I was involved in. Mrs. Long just inspired us. It was just great fun, just a wonderful diversion. You didn't have to wear a uniform. You didn't have to um, salute anybody. It was a different world. It was a nice escape.
Mhm. What's your brother's name?
James.
James.
Interestingly, my brother, um, he became involved in the journalism, and he was the editor of the Reveille, which was the paper, the school paper, which was because it was published at a junior college, it was considered a college paper, and he won Georgia Press Awards for the finest college newspaper in Georgia one year. And he and his classmates who worked on the newspaper um, received the honor. Uh, uh, but he graduated in 1966. He was only there 3 years, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. I was there 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. But I'm very proud of what my brother did with the school newspaper, and I still have the uh, copies of it from, gosh, 55 years ago.
Golly.
And it's I'm sure y'all have it in the library. But the point was, my point was, my brother was editor for 2 years of that school paper, and they won big awards, and it was very entertaining to read, just chatty. It's fun to read.
I'll have to have, I have read a couple of issues that have been posted on our various little groups. I'll have to have a look and look for his name.
Yeah, look at 1966, 65, and 66, and you'll get an idea of. He wrote several columns. He would just, he had several pen names, and he would write under. So, in addition to being editor.
I love it.
Pretty good stuff. But we finished about drama. I just wanted to say that being involved in drama was just a wonderful release. It was a lot of fun. And the kids that watched our performances seemed to like it too. I remember getting applause and taking curtain calls. It was pretty nice.
Yeah, it's nice to have a bunch of people applaud you when you
Yeah.
do work. It doesn't happen with everything you do. I often say when people say, well, why, when they ask about people coming to see our shows or whatever, and I say, well, it's nice if people can come, but it's not everybody's job where where a bunch of people show up and just start applauding at the end when you finish something. It's kind of a unique thing. So it's such a small, the performance is such a small part of the whole process. So I love that you mentioned that it was sort of a bit of an escape from, you didn't have to wear your uniform and all that.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah, and a lot of guys contributed. We had lighting crews and stage crews and artists that would paint the backgrounds. Everybody, a lot of people contributed, and it was wonderful.
Do you remember if the town was involved? Sometime at some point in my fairly recent past, before I got to Gordon, there was perhaps more town involvement, but was there town involvement when you were there? Do you remember?
Yeah, of course, because the local boys and girls would attend. Sure. So sure, the local boys had to be in uniform anytime they were on campus. The girls didn't wear uniforms, and the girls and so I'm certain there was town involvement. I'm certain that the parents would come and attend these campus-wide events. I don't, of course, and football games, of course, they went to. But I wasn't cognizant of the fact that there were parents of local students there. It just, again, it was my own little world, I was completely involved in, so I just wasn't aware of outside influences. It just wasn't part of my consciousness.
Yeah, certainly wasn't when I was that age either. One of the things that you talked about in your first interview really touched me, and that was when you talked about the transition from Gordon Military College to the new Gordon. You felt as though, and you're not the only one who has shared this, that the military school was being sort of erased a little bit. Maybe I'm putting words into your mouth, but
That's
just
the word. That's the word.
disappeared a little bit.
It was hurtful and shameful that the administration that immediately followed the transition of the school decided to erase, eliminate, completely destroy any remnants of the fact that it had been a military school. Being military was not popular. Remember, this was 1972. And of course, and that was when Americans rebuffed the heroes that came back from the Vietnam War, the guys that went to a war that nobody really wanted except the politicians. So there was this anti-military atmosphere. It was easy to be anti-military at that time and knew it. So we caused horrible damage and pain to our vets who came back from Vietnam. They just went to do what they were told to do. They were just trying to do their job. And then you have the administration just utterly destroying, eliminating the military school heritage, which is why the military memorial there was made up, is from alumni who said, we need to remember, the school needs to remember that this was once a military school. Hundreds, thousands of boys passed through there. Many of them were improved. Their lives were changed for the better because of what happened there. So you have to remember it, warts and all. You got to remember the bad things as well as the good things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I had a couple of classmates, Dr. Deborah Mae Johnson. Is that? I think yes. Survived the administration that was so ugly, so destructive of Gordon's heritage, and she's one of my classmates and lives there in Barnesville. And she has firsthand knowledge of what happened, but we only saw it secondhand, and it just hurt like crazy.
Really? Yeah. Well, to that end, I've taken up almost an hour of your time. It feels like it's been like 5 minutes for me.
Well, I'll talk as long as you want to. I'm perfectly fine to. If there's a couple other points you'd like to touch on, we can do that.
Well, I am curious, and maybe I should ask Deborah Mae Johnson as well, as we're working really hard to try to gather stories and perspectives from, as it's impossible to interview everybody, but we're trying to. So,
Good.
but that I find really, and that made me really emotional when you talked about that in your first interview, because erasing the past is so harmful. And as you said, warts and all, because you can't, it's not helpful to the human spirit to pretend that things didn't happen. It's not good or bad. It's part of it. It's part of the human experience.
Yeah, it's part of the human experience. Yes.
So
when you love someone, when you love a person, they're not perfect. Everybody has their faults, but you love them in spite of, or because of, or including their faults. And Gordon was like that. It shouldn't have been treated that way. I understand they had to make a change. I get that. But changing the architecture completely was hard enough. The school now faces Alumni Memorial Hall, and it used to face the other direction. It used to face up in the direction, well, just opposite the direction that it faces now. And what is now the front of the school was the back of the school. And all of our activities took place on the what was then the front. So it's funny, even after 52, 53 years, I think of the little driveway that leads beside alumni house, walks down to where Summers Field is. I don't know if you know that it's between the women's building and the alumni house. I can still feel and hear what it was like to march down that little street on a cool Friday evening, a clear, crisp, cool Friday evening, and all you hear is a crunch of cadet heels on the gravel, just tramping uh, down that little street to go to a football game. It's amazing that the things that you remember about uh, about the school, and so it was so hurtful when the change was being made to eliminate the military heritage of the place.
I think that there's a lesson to be learned from that moving forward too.
Yeah,
Gordon's gone through so many changes. It's a very different place now, you know. Even in the 7 years that I've been there, it has changed so much.
yeah. I have a cousin that lives out in the Redbone community, and he's seen it. He's lived there all of his life. He graduated high school in 1953, so he's observed all those changes, and he's embraced it. He was a Barnesville booster. I mean, he was a Chamber of Commerce guy and insurance agent, and he's still alive. But he every time I would come and visit Gordon, he'd say, "Let's go around the campus. Let me show you what's happening," and all the things that had been changing, and look how much land they've got, and this is where this building's going to go. And he embraced it, and he didn't feel the pain of loss of the military part like I did, because he didn't live there. He lived out in the Redbone community, but south of town. So yeah, the school has changed.
I wonder, like, I mean, really, I think that there are so many things that have to happen to keep a school alive. And I'm hearing with fresh ears what you're saying about some of the reasons that you observed that change happened the way that it did. And you can't go back and fix it because that's not how life is. But I do wonder if you have any perspective on what are some good things that we could do as a campus community to, I don't know, bring, I guess the word healing comes to mind, but as you know, I'm a theater professional, so of course it does. But I'm just wondering if you have any advice or thoughts about how to do that.
Wow.
I know.
I guess the best thing the school could do is just continue to remember that that used to be very different, and we had a different makeup of students. Since I follow Gordon, I know that most of the students that attend, most of them live in the counties that surround Gordon because they drive in. Our military school had kids from all over the place. My roommate was from Venezuela. Other guys were from Puerto Rico. Of course, a lot of kids from Florida, North Carolina. They were from everywhere. So the kids that are going there now don't have an understanding of, we were kind of almost international in scope, not quite. And that when I go back to the campus, what I like to do is just stand there and remember and say, oh yes, Lambden Hall, we used to be oriented in the opposite direction. And this is where we would stand. And this is where the flagpole was. And this is where Pound Hall used to be. And this is where Powell Hall used to be. Oh, and the commandant's office was over there. And that's the bullpen area where we were punished. So there are touchstones. You know, you want to go and lay your hands on these places and stand in those places and think and remember what it was like. So I guess nowadays, if the school would just respect those touchstones that we have and remember that the people who went before remember things as they were then, was so very different. Yeah. One thing we haven't talked about much is sick call. You know, as a boarding student, if you were ill, you couldn't go to class. If you were sick, you had to go and report for sick call, in which you walked across campus to a little white house where Nurse Quillian, Miss Q, what she was called, lived. And that lady could spot a gold bricking kid, somebody who was faking illness, from 50 feet away. You could not get past her. She'd say, okay, come on in. And she kind of give you the stink eye, look at you, take your temperature. And she said, "You're not sick. You get back to campus." And she'd write in her book, Cadet Robertson dismissed from sick call. But if you were sick, they took care of you. And the house, it was a house basically, and there were bedrooms in there. If you were sick, you were in bed, and the mess hall sent meals over, and if you could eat. But she was tough. That lady, was no getting past her. You just couldn't get past her. And that the house is gone, of course. And Miss Quillian, I'm afraid, is maybe forgotten because she was, in her 60s, I guess, when I was there. But thousands of cadets tried to get past her, trying to ditch school by faking being sick, and she wasn't going to have any of it. You could not get past her. And of course, you've heard stories about Major Dickinson, our commandant, during the 60s. He was just an inspiration. He was tough. He was fair. He had high standards, and he could look you in the eye and take your measure real quick about whether or not you were being sincere, whether you were trying your best. And if you were trying your best and you did well, you were acknowledged, and that meant everything. Every Saturday morning we had an inspection, and Major Dickinson would come around and inspect the barracks and look at the way you kept your room. Was your bed made properly? Your clothes put away properly? Was the barracks clean? Were all the restrooms? Because we had to do all of our own janitorial work. And so every Saturday morning, and if Major Dickinson found fault, you were punished. But if you met his standard, which was very high, you were acknowledged, and by that felt great. There's plenty of stories going around about Ray T. Dickinson, and he went on to be a high school counselor up in Atlanta after Gordon closed.
After the military portion of it?
Yes, I mean after the military school they should have kept him, but
it wasn't ever completely closed down, was it?
I don't know. By the time they made the transition, I was graduating college. That was 1972, 71, 72.
Okay.
And I was up at Georgia State in Atlanta, working and going to school, trying to stay out of the Army.
Oh golly, yeah. My dad
had a student deferment, and I wanted to keep it. Some of my high school friends did not get high school deferments. They went to Vietnam, and it hurt them deeply, and it bothered. It changed them.
Yeah, my dad, my father-in-law, and his brother both went. Charles, my father-in-law, was in airplanes most of the time, so he didn't see action on the ground, and his brother did, and boy, very big difference there.
Big
really
difference.
Hard. Yeah, really hard stuff. So, well, that's really interesting information about. I would love to hear you talk to Tanya Coleman. We call her TC. She's one of the professors on campus, but her main responsibility is the dorms. And they still do inspections.
No kidding.
Oh yes. So it would be interesting to hear y'all two talk about the differences between those inspections. She's amazing. I think she's probably older than me, but she looks like she's younger than me. So, lucky her. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Russell.
Sure.
Do you have anything else that that stands out from that time that you want to share? Perspectives about then and now, or anything about any other transitional moments in the college? That's kind of the focus of the study, is transitional moments. So I'll pull us back to that.
Well, the transition didn't happen till after I left. I was asked when I graduated high school, I was asked to say that they said, "Aren't you going to come back for junior college?" And they said, "You're already an officer, you'll be cadet brigade commander," and that kind of thing. But by then, 1968, I'd had my fill. I didn't want it anymore at the time. So I wanted to get away from Gordon's and went to Georgia State. I don't know what to comment about the transition except what I've done before about how the places that we used to interact and the places that we remember, many of them are gone or modified so much you can hardly tell what they are. I had the good fortune of living at the T Street Barracks where the county commissioner's building is now. And that was kind of neat. It was always neat to live I think we called it T Street. There were two buildings over there that we lived in. And marching for every morning from that building across around Summersfield and up to the campus was always fun because we'd be out there about 6 a.m. marching and singing bawdy military songs just to irritate the neighbors. And so we'd be marching around the curve at Summersfield, that curved road, and we'd stop, turn and face the city, and as loud as we could say it all together, "Good morning, Barnesville," and then turn and march, close, do a left face, and then march up to campus to go to the mess hall. The mess hall, it was run by a guy during the 60s named Tampa Brown. He was supposed to be this great cook. He had his wonderful cafe at the corner up in town. And the school was so proud. Hey, we got Tampa Brown running our mess hall. Well, to kids, cafeteria food is always awful, no matter how good it is. It's always awful. And we all complained about the food, but it was really pretty good. And occasionally we would have food fights in the mess hall, which is down in the basement of Landon Hall. I'll just tell you this quick story that, I don't know, bunch of boys, springtime, you're feeling antsy, and just like a bunch of young puppies. Anyway, we were served an entree and 2 vegetables, biscuits and tea, and you could go back for seconds. There was much vegetables or biscuits and gravy and tea that you wanted. You can only get 1 meat entree. So guys would take a plate full of biscuits and open them up and go to the back of the mess hall, and where the lady there would douse your plate full of biscuits with gravy, and you eat your meal and then scarf those up, and then kept doing that 2 or 3 times till you got full. Well, because of that, there were always biscuits available, rolls, and somebody would throw one, and then when one guy threw one, everybody started throwing one, yelling and screaming. And Tampa, the chef, Tampa Brown, you could just see his chef's hat. He wore this tall chef's hat. You could see, poof, he was upset that because they would have to clean up the mess. And pretty soon you'd look out through the window up, because we were kind of below grade. We'd look up through the window, and here comes Major Dickinson. And brother, I'm going to tell you, we busted out the back door there as quick as we could, because if he caught you, you were in deep, deep trouble. I mean, it was bad enough that you had to go and do bullpen walking, but when Major Dickinson got right up close to you and looked you in the eye and gave you that one eye with his teeth set, you thought, oh, my world is going to end. I'm going to die. He's going to kill me. I mean, he never did anything violent. It was just the threat of it. But anyway, we'd have these food fights every once in a while and make a horrible mess, but leave before Major Dickinson could come. The guys that stayed to throw rolls always got in trouble. But anyway, Tampa Brown was the guy who ran the kitchen, and we made jokes about the food, just mystery meat, and that kind of thing.
Yes.
And and the boys from up north, when they would serve breakfast, of course, they'd get a big tablespoon of grits, and they'd look at this white stuff that's on their plate, and they'd say, "What is that?" And us Southern boys would laugh at him. "Ha ha, you dope! Those are grits. Put salt and pepper on them, eat them." And they'd poke at them with their fork until the grits sort of solidified and became just this white puddle on the plate, solid mass of congealed grits. And it moved from being grits to grit. That's a grit. And the guys would pick it up with their fork and throw it at somebody, or the Yankee boys would sprinkle sugar. We thought it was hilarious. They'd put sugar on their grits.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Ha ha ha, that is so funny. But how culturally ignorant can you be? Of course, again, our little world, Southern boys world, everybody has grits. You have biscuits and gravy and
Yep.
fried pork chops and turnip greens and sweet
Mm,
tea. And
and-
that's the other thing. The boys would take this sweet tea, and they would, because it was so very sweet,
Yes.
they would to be shocked by how sweet the tea was.
Yes.
Anyway, Tampa Brown ran the mess hall, and when we didn't have 21 meals a week. We only had 20. Sunday evening, there was no meal.
Huh?
So you went to breakfast, you came back for dinner, or it was lunch, but it's called dinner. And it was a big meal, turkey and dressing and gravy and stuff like that. But then Sunday night, there was no meal. But if you're 15 or 16 years old on Sunday night, you're hungry. So we had to go into town and find a meal and buy it. But everybody deserved a day off. Poor old Tampa worked 6.5 days a week. So he needed that after that Sunday evening off and not serve a meal.
Now I'm sure I have missed it. I've never heard somebody talk about Tampa before. Can you describe Tampa?
Tampa Brown, he's in the high school annual. He's about, I would say at the time, 55 to 65 years old, balding, always dressed in a white chef's outfit with the tall hat. All of the food servers were dressed in white smocks and had the paper service type caps on. When they had fried eggs for breakfast, the server would actually pick up the fried egg with his fingers and put it on your plate. Then use the spatula, because if you use a spatula, he'd break the fried egg. So he'd pick it up. And anyway, Tampa, I guess he sold his cafe, or he didn't run it anymore, but he was full time at Gordon at running the mess hall while we were there. Oh, but the luncheon, of course, the local boys would eat lunch in there, and the girls would eat lunch there. So our behavior in midday was quite a bit different than at breakfast. We were all sullen, because we were sleepy. When it's like for teenage boys to be, they don't want to get up in the morning, and it was 6:30 and we were eating. And so there was very little conversation. Midday was better. The kids were mixed, the boys and girls together. And then back at nighttime, it was just us boarding cadets. So the atmosphere would change with each meal. The food was, at the time we thought the food was terrible, because all high school kids think their cafeteria food is terrible. And you could have put a prime rib down for those guys and they wouldn't have known the difference. Yeah. But I was well fed.
Yeah, that sounds like very traditional, delicious Southern fare.
Oh yeah.
To me.
Yeah, we had a cream chip beef on toast, which has a different name. I'm sure you've heard of that before.
Yes, I have.
And that was new to many kids. So we'd have fried eggs and grits, or scrambled eggs and grits, and learn to drink coffee, at Gordon. And anyway, it was pretty basic food. It was, but it was, and looking back, it was a lot better than I thought so at the time. Mm-hmm. So
I have a question.
All right.
Do you happen to, I love that you said that the cadets all stood at the top and yelled "Good morning, Burnsville."
Just us boys in T Street. Nobody else did that.
Oh, okay.
Because we were more, see, all the rest of the boys they were already on campus. We were the remote, we were what, a quarter of a mile away. And but so it was just a lark that we did, just something to thumb our nose at the at the local citizens.
Do you remember any of those songs that you sang?
Oh yeah, but absolutely not. They're too graphic, describing female anatomy and things like that, which I won't do for the recording. But I still hear them in my head.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They were vulgar, truly vulgar. but it sure got, if you're 14 or 15 years old, it'll get your attention. It'll help keep you in step as you march. And the
Yeah.
cool thing about it, I was mentioning earlier about how I can hear in my memory of the crunch of the cadets as we marched down to football, and that's all you would hear. A lot of times in the morning, that's all you'd hear is in unison, about 50 boys marching in step, absolutely quiet except for the platoon leader or first sergeant. It was me. So he'd be giving instruction like left, right, in order to get boys to start off on the correct foot. You always start on your left foot. But then if you weren't counting cadence in unison, all you hear was their footfalls, and it's spooky. And it's really kind of neat. And because it's just the fall of the heel on gravel, crunch, 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 50 boys marching together. So to break it up in the morning, we'd stop halfway around Summersfield and greet the citizens of Barnesville with a good morning greeting.
I love that. Wonderful.
Now, there's only about 50 of us at T Street.
That's a lot, though. That's a lot of boys.
We were two to a room. When I first went to Gordon, there were 4 of us in one room. One room about, I would say, 12 by 12, 12 by 15. 2 sets of bunks and only 2 desks. So at nighttime, 2 boys had to study sitting on their beds, which you weren't supposed to do, but that was the only place you could do it. Because we had quiet time between 7 and 9 o'clock. You had to be at your desk doing homework.
Gosh.
No television, no radio, nothing. And your cadet platoon sergeant would occasionally patrol. You had to leave your door open, and he'd look in to make sure that you were at your desk studying, doing your homework.
I don't know if kids could do that now.
Well, maybe they said that about us. We also had open restrooms. There was no privacy in the restrooms in Pound Hall. They were just right out in a hallway, a common area latrine. So when moms and sisters would come and visit, you'd have to announce to the barracks, there's a woman in that barracks. So anybody who was on the toilet would leave, so the visitors wouldn't encounter them.
Wow.
Common areas, common showers, common restrooms, common meals. That's just the way it was done.
All right.
And we had to clean those restrooms. And remember, we were inspected every week. So we were the ones. If you created a mess, you or your buddies would have to clean it up, sweep, mop, wipe down, polish, all that stuff, in addition to your own room. So the common areas were part of like the lobby and the hallways we had to do also. And then for GI, government inspection, which we had once a year when the Army came around to see if we were a decent military school and to maintain our status, we did a lot of painting on our own. We had to go out and buy paint stuff and polish it up and make repairs.
Wow.
So when the visiting Army guys would come and look, they'd see that we lived in barracks that were proper.
It seems like that Gordon's military school was perhaps a little more healthy than the one that my husband went to.
Healthy? I don't know. I guess it was healthy if you weren't the object of bullying or harassing. Because we could make life miserable for kids if we wanted to, and we did. I'm ashamed to say, I would pick on them too. We'd just select somebody, kind of like Lord of the Flies sort of thing. We would just select somebody and pick on them. And for those kids, and some are in my class, that made them resilient. They probably reached down inside themselves and learned stuff about how strong they were that they didn't even know they had. It demonstrated internal strength they didn't know they had. So I'm not saying we did them a favor. We did them no favors. But because we can be pretty tough. It's pretty, you're 12 years old or 14 years old and all your stuff is being thrown out the window. And you got to go out and pick it up and it's dirty. And then you get in trouble because your uniform's dirty because it was thrown in the mud. Anyway, it's not fair. It wasn't fair.
I know my sweet husband, he ended up for all sorts of reasons being quite a little bit of trouble for his parents. And the military school he went to was, oh, golly, I've forgotten the name of it. I believe it was in North Carolina.
Boone.
And what was that?
Boone Military School or something?
That sounds right.
Yeah, Boone, yeah.
Okay. So the thing that he was only there for 1 year. And the thing that he took away from it that he shares, he shares a few things about it, not too much, was that it seemed to him that in his class, apparently, he felt like that it was all the kids who were about to be criminals, such as himself, he thought, pre-delinquents or delinquents that were sent to this military school. And he said, and we were all put in the same place. And he always goes, now, Lisa, what do you think we did? Like, oh my goodness, Patrick. So.
Well, we had a mysterious character at our school called the Phantom. And the Phantom would pull pranks, move the cannon that we had out front of the school, or paint the tank pink, or because we had a military tank on the campus, or trash a professor's office. And he would leave his calling card, PH, which stood for Phantom. I never knew who the Phantom was. I never found out. But over a period of about 2 or 3 years, the Phantom would be the cause of many pranks. So we had the same type of guys. They were just clever. And we had some tough characters too. We had some guys that were pretty tough. And if you tried to get in their face about military discipline, they'd knock you down. So yeah, we had tough guys also. And as I told you earlier, I was at 12 years old, 10, 11, 12 years old. I was on my way to being a juvenile delinquent second class, because I wasn't really up to doing really bad stuff yet.
Yeah.
But I was on my way.
I mean, you're in Maryland. There's lots of opportunities there for good and bad.
Right. Lived outside of Washington in the suburbs. Oh, yeah. Stealing Coca-Colas and candy, that kind of thing. Picking on other kids, just being a bully, to being a little twit. And so Gordon straightened me out real quick.
Golly. Well, I would love to hang out all day, and that's the truth, but I probably should go to the rest of my job now.
All right.
If you think of anything else that
I'm glad we touched on Ms. Quillian and Tampa Brown and Major Dickinson. These are guys that really had an effect on me personally, and I'm glad and the teachers and some of the teachers that we had. All around, it was a wonderful experience. I had a lot of people affect my life. I'm glad that at the time in the beginning, I hated it, but I learned to like it. And I learned to thrive in it. And by the time I graduated from high school, I was really thriving, but becoming burnt out on the military aspect of it. And looking back, I wish I had gone on and stayed at Gordon for 2 more years. I would have liked to have done that. But you make the decisions and you move on. You can't do anything about it. It was a wonderful experience. There was completely different time. We were more innocent, more naive. We weren't as grown up. We weren't as aware of the outside world and all of the things that kids nowadays are. Kids have it tougher, I think, nowadays. And with all the conveniences, they have it much harder. Peer pressure is terrible.
It's terrible.
And it's tough being a kid nowadays, a young person. And it's the world is changing so fast, and the speed of change is increasing all the time. It's tough to keep up. So I have no envy for young people these days, or the adults that have to supervise them.
Yeah, it's an interesting time right now, that's for sure.
But
But
it
stories
has been
help.
a pleasure to have spoken with you and shared these memories. I appreciate the opportunity to do that. Do go back and look at the newspaper, the Reveille from 65 and 66, and
Well,
go into the yearbooks in the early 60s and look up Mrs. Long, because she was our speech and drama person.
okay.
And you'll get a greater appreciation for the things that she did.
Okay, great. I'm really excited I got to spend some time with you. Sandwich is really happy too that she got to spend some time with you.
Well,
And
since we're sharing pets, this is Casper,
oh, hi, Casper.
and he's a pretty cool cat, and he sleeps
Hi.
on a little pillow right there next to my computer. But I've awakened him, so now he's a little irritated. And
Oh,
down behind me, Giselle, come up, come up, come up. I don't know if you can see
I can.
Giselle, come here, come here.
Hello,
Oh,
Giselle.
she's now. My wife has
Oh,
just entered the room, so she's excited about seeing Kim.
those eyes though. I saw the eyes for a second and that little tail.
Yeah, here's Giselle, come here.
Hi, Giselle. Hi.
Anyway, I don't think you can see her.
Oh,
Giselle, come here, babe. There she is.
look. Oh my God. Gorgeous.
Anyway, yeah,
Absolutely gorgeous.
anyway, so we have a menagerie as well.
All right. Well, I will let you, we'll try to keep everybody up to date as we continue to
Okay.
find folks. And if you think of anything else you want to share, please reach out. Dr. Trailer and I and one of our students, we're going to get to go to Minneapolis to present some of our findings from this amazing research project this summer.
Well,
So that's going to be
what
cool.
is the result? I mean, what will you be sharing that?
We don't know yet. Now,
Oh, okay.
I was going to say the children. Oh my gosh, I am getting old. The students they're really trying to work toward assembling. They've got multiple documentaries running around in their brains, and we're working hard to let them guide this. But the guiding principle of this is unearthing. That's why unearthing stories that have been forgotten and getting a more well-rounded idea of the journey that the Gordon campus has taken over the many decades. So yeah.
End with this.
You're back.
Let me end with this. I had 5 years there, like books on a shelf. Think of 5 books lined up on a shelf. The bookends were the assassination of John Kennedy in 1963 when I entered, and the assassination of Dr. King and Robert Kennedy in 1968. In between those 2 bookends, there was huge drama, huge upheaval. And Gordon actually insulated us from a lot of that. We saw it, it was out there,
Yeah.
but we weren't living it like other people were. If we had been up in Atlanta, it would have been an entirely different atmosphere.
Yeah.
But that's what's unique about the class of 68 is that we had those horrible events on either end of our time at Gordon. Later on, you look back and you begin to have a greater appreciation for the turmoil that we went through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a complex statement that you just made that I don't even know how to respond other than thanks for surviving it so that you can tell stories from it, because it's
Thank you. Thank you for being interested enough to ask. And I'm afraid that too many former Gordon students think that the school doesn't care. So this is a great project because it lets everybody know that y'all are interested in what happened during that time and that you want to hear about it. Thanks for taking the time to listen, because it means a lot to be able to share these things.
Well, never doubt the fact that the campus is highly motivated to learn everything about it. So
Okay. All right. That's fine.
thank you,
Okay.
Russ.
All right, Lisa. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Yes, have safe travels.
Okay. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.